No one knew why the boy kept coming back until a black SUV pulled up and Arnold stepped inside. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today. And if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The morning rush had just passed when Jenny saw him for the first time. He slipped in through the diner's front door like a shadow, small and silent, barely making a sound as he took the seat closest to the window. No parents, no backpack, just a faded gray hoodie a few sizes too large, and a book with corners worn soft from use. He didn't ask for a menu, didn't look around, just opened the book and started to read, his shoulders pulled in tight like he was trying to disappear. Jenny noticed him the way someone might notice a loose tile on the floor, quietly, without making a thing of it. She was wiping down the coffee station when she realized he hadn't ordered anything. 20 minutes passed, then 40. He didn't even have water. But when she walked by, he looked up just enough to meet her eyes. Not with a question, not even with fear, just a kind of tired knowing. Like he'd already lived through the answer to whatever you might ask. She didn't say anything, just poured a glass of water, set it on the table, and moved on. The next morning he came back. Same table, same book, same silence. Jenny had seen her share of strange regulars, but something about this boy didn't sit like strangeness. It sat like hunger, the kind you don't ask about, the kind that lives in the bones. So she placed a plate on the corner of the table, half a grilled cheese, a handful of fries, a small bowl of applesauce. Nothing fancy, no explanations, just leftovers from a wrong order she forgot to ring up. The boy didn't touch it right away. He waited until she was gone. But later, when she walked by again, the plate was empty and the glass of water was half full. He didn't say thank you. She didn't expect him to. It became a rhythm. Each day around the same time, he showed up. Each day, Jenny found a reason to slide food onto his table. An extra side, a sandwich split from another plate, something warm, something small, and always without a word. Some of the waitresses noticed. The younger one smirked. "You starting a daycare?" One of them asked. "Kid doesn't even tip." Jenny shrugged. "Neither does my cat." Still feed him. Others weren't so kind. One of the cooks muttered about freeloaders. The manager gave her a side glance but didn't say much. It was quiet enough that it didn't cause trouble. Yet, the boy kept coming. Never 5 days in a row. Sometimes he'd disappear for a weekend, then return as if nothing had changed. Same hoodie, same book, sometimes a scrape on his knee or a new hole in his sleeve. He never looked directly at anyone except Jenny. And even then it was brief, polite, distant. Jenny never asked his name. He never offered it. She didn't need it. People like him had a way of disappearing if you tried too hard to see them. One afternoon, she brought him a hot chocolate, slipped beside the fries. It wasn't cold outside, but he held the mug with both hands like it was the only warm thing he'd touched all day. That day, when he left, he tucked the napkin under the plate before sliding out of the booth. When she cleared the table, she noticed something drawn on it in pencil. 2 stick figures, one standing, one sitting at a table, a plate between them. A shaky heart hovered over both heads. Jenny didn't tell anyone, just folded the napkin and placed it in her pocket. The days passed. Summer gave way to autumn, and still he came. Quiet, predictable, almost like clockwork. But he never ordered a thing. And Jenny never charged him. She told herself it wasn't charity. It was just food, just someone paying attention. The kind of thing the world should do more often, if it wasn't so busy pretending not to see. Every time she dropped off a plate, she left just a little more. A slice of banana bread. A smile she didn't show to anyone else. A second napkin folded in half. She didn't know what he needed, but she figured he needed something, and she could give that much. So she did, without condition, without demand, without ever expecting to be remembered. The boy never spoke, but the silence between them became familiar, predictable, comforting, in a way that words might have ruined. Jenny had learned a long time ago that some people didn't need conversation. They needed consistency, and she could offer that. A plate set quietly, a refill of water, a nod from across the room. She never hovered, never asked questions, and he never asked for anything more. It was the third week when she noticed something change. He started coming in just after the breakfast crowd cleared out, always choosing the same booth by the window. But now, when she approached, his hands would still slightly, his fingers pausing on the spine of his book as if he was waiting. Not for food, not for her, just waiting to be seen. Jenny didn't acknowledge it. She just placed the plate and walked away. One morning it was scrambled eggs and toast, buttered at the edges. Another day, 2 pancakes folded over banana slices. She never brought the same thing twice. It felt wrong to assume. One afternoon, she caught the manager watching. He leaned against the doorway to the kitchen, arms folded, expression unreadable. She kept wiping the table beside the boy's booth, pretending not to notice. Later, while restocking the syrup caddies, he called her into the back. "You feeding that kid again?" he asked. Jenny didn't flinch. "He eats what's left over. Nothing charged. No waste." He raised an eyebrow. "Waste is money. You know that." She nodded. "So is kindness. Sometimes." He didn't respond right away. Just scratched at the back of his neck and looked past her. "You know we're not a soup kitchen, right?" "I know," she said, voice quiet. "But maybe we could be a little better than that." He didn't agree. But he didn't stop her either. Not then. The other waitresses had started to talk more openly. One rolled her eyes as Jenny passed with another plate. "Gonna adopt him next?" Jenny kept walking. Another shook her head. "You keep feeding people who won't even look at you. Pretty soon they'll expect it." Jenny didn't explain. She wasn't trying to win hearts. She was just trying to do something that felt right in a world that often didn't. The boy never changed his routine, never greeted her, never lingered. He finished his food, packed his book, and left quietly through the same door he'd entered. But one morning, he left behind a napkin folded into a triangle. Jenny didn't see it until she cleared the plate. Inside the fold was a single word, written in shaky block letters. "Thanks." She didn't tell anyone. The next day, he came back as usual, head down, book in hand. But when she placed his plate, grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, a corner of cornbread, he looked up, just briefly, just long enough for her to see something new behind his eyes. Not fear, not shame, something more like understanding. Maybe even trust. Jenny didn't smile. She didn't want to scare it away. But she gave a small nod before walking away. The quiet routine continued. A month passed. Then 2. She started to notice when he didn't come. Mondays were often empty. Fridays sometimes. 2. On those days, she'd still prep a plate, just in case. It stayed warm on the back counter for an hour or so before she gave it to the dishwasher or wrapped it up for herself. She told herself it wasn't about the food anymore. It was about presence, about telling someone, without saying a word, that they mattered. One Wednesday morning, the boy came in with a fresh tear on the cuff of his sleeve and a red mark just below his left eye. Jenny didn't ask. But that day, she brought 2 slices of pie instead of one. Apple and cherry. No decision required. He ate both, then left a quarter on the table beside the empty plate. She didn't spend it. Some of the regulars started to notice the boy more. An older woman asked, "Is he your nephew?" "No," Jenny said simply. "Friend of the family?" "No," the woman hesitated. "Then why do you feed him?" Jenny refilled her coffee before answering. "Because someone should." That was the end of that. But not everyone stayed silent. One man, mid-40s, ties slightly loosened, muttered loud enough for the counter to hear, "Kids these days know how to work an easy mark." Jenny didn't respond. But the next day, the boy didn't come in. And the day after that, he was still gone. She made a plate anyway, just in case. The booth by the window stayed empty for 3 days. Jenny still filled the coffee pots, still wiped down the same tables, still prepped the back corner like she always did. But without the boy, the rhythm fell off. She caught herself glancing at the door more often, pausing mid-step when the bell above it chimed. Each time, it was someone else. A couple on a road trip, a local trucker, never him. On the 4th morning, She made a small plate anyway. Toast, a hard-boiled egg, a half-orange sliced neatly. She left it on the counter near the kitchen. Didn't bother putting it on a tray. The line cook raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Even the manager didn't comment this time. They'd seen enough to know better than to try and explain her habits. By noon, the plate went untouched. She gave it to the dishwasher. By Friday, the whispers returned. One of the servers leaned in while counting her tips and said, "Guess your little friend moved on." Jenny didn't answer. Probably found someone else to give him free food. That's how it works. Jenny finished wiping the sugar shaker, her grip a little tighter than usual. "People take advantage," the woman added, "especially when you let them." Jenny set the shaker down and walked away. Later that afternoon, a customer, someone new, sat at the boy's usual booth. He didn't stay long, just ordered a coffee and spent most of his time scrolling through his phone. But it unsettled her, seeing someone else in that seat, like the space was sacred, and no one else knew it. She didn't tell him to move, but she didn't refill his cup either. That evening, while closing out her shift, she found herself lingering at the booth. The window caught the last of the sunlight, casting a warm glow on the empty seat. She ran her hand over the table slowly, then reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the napkin the boy had once folded and left behind. The one with the word "Thanks" scrawled across it in pencil. She kept it folded in half now. The edges softened from her fingers, finding it again and again. It was just a napkin, just one word, but it had weight. And lately, the absence of that weight felt heavier than ever. The next morning, she arrived at the diner 30 minutes early. She sat in the last booth, the one facing the parking lot, and watched the road. Not for anything specific. Just watched. A delivery truck passed. A family minivan. Nothing unusual. She brewed the first pot of coffee herself. Even though it wasn't her turn, when the boy still didn't appear, she made a plate again. A small stack of pancakes, one pat of butter melting, just enough to form a small golden pool. She placed it in the window, quietly. "I thought we weren't doing this anymore," the manager said, passing by. "I'm not doing it for him," she replied. "I'm doing it for me." He didn't argue. The weekend came and went without a trace. No note, no napkin, no quarter on the table. Just a quiet reminder that sometimes people vanish. Sometimes the people you try to help are the ones you never get to see again. Jenny knew that feeling too well. She'd grown up in the foster system, shuffled around between people who forgot her birthday and barely remembered her name. She'd learned how to disappear long before she learned how to be seen. Maybe that's why the boy had mattered. Maybe that's why she recognized the quiet in him, because she'd carried it too. Monday morning. She stood at a register, watching the sunlight climb slowly across the tile floor. She'd make a plate that day. She told herself it was time to let go. But at 11:45, just as the lunch rush began, she noticed something under the booth's napkin dispenser. It wasn't folded, just a scrap of paper, torn from the edge of a notebook. No name, no date, just 4 words, written carefully. "I'll be back soon." Jenny held the paper for a long time. She didn't show it to anyone, didn't say a word. But when the rush ended, she walked to the kitchen, made a grilled cheese with extra cheddar, cut the crust, and left it warming on the back shelf, just in case. Because sometimes knowing someone will return is enough to keep hope on the table. And sometimes a scrap of paper is worth more than any promise spoken out loud. The note stayed in her apron pocket, folded and worn at the edges. Jenny didn't show it to anyone. She didn't have to. She knew what it meant, knew the shape of it. The message was clear in its simplicity. He hadn't forgotten, and that was enough to keep her making plates. But days passed, then a week, and he didn't return. Every morning, she made something small, a sandwich wrapped in wax paper, a bowl of soup kept warm on the back shelf. She stopped putting it out in the open, just left it waiting like a seat saved in silence. Some of the staff rolled their eyes, but they'd learned to say nothing. The manager didn't ask anymore. He'd stopped trying to understand her reasons. By the second week, the waiting began to ache. She wouldn't have called it grief, not yet, but it settled in the same places. in her chest, in her hands, in the way she started scanning the door less frequently, because each time it opened and he wasn't there, something small unraveled. She tried to reason with herself. Maybe he'd moved. Maybe he'd gotten help. Maybe someone with more money or a better offer had stepped in. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't need her anymore, and that should have been a good thing. Should have felt like closure. It didn't. On the 15th day, she found herself scrubbing the table by the window longer than usual. The cloth moved in slow, deliberate circles, though the surface was already clean. Her eyes burned. Not from tears, they hadn't come, just from something deeper. The kind of tire that settles in when hope keeps knocking, but no one answers. That night, while closing up, she opened the drawer where she kept the napkin he'd drawn on. She unfolded it, smoothed it flat. The pencil had faded slightly, but the shapes remained. The stick figures, the plate between them, the heart floating above their heads. She stared at it for a long time before folding it again and tucking it into the new envelope she carried in her purse, just in case. On day 23 it rained. Not the soft kind. The kind that came with thunder and wet shoes and umbrellas left behind in cars. She showed up early, anyway, turned on the lights, brewed the coffee. No one else had arrived yet. The diner felt still, like the world was holding its breath. She moved through her tasks the way she always did, measured, methodical. The booth by the window was empty, same as it had been for 3 weeks. She didn't make a plate that day, didn't even unwrap a sandwich. She just stared at the seat for a few seconds longer than usual, then walked to the back and clocked in. The morning crowd came and went. Rain beat against the windows. Mid-shift, she stepped outside to toss the trash. And that's when she saw it. A black SUV, clean and matte, had pulled into the diner's lot. It wasn't parked like a customer's vehicle. It faced the front door, engine still running. She paused, watched. A second SUV pulled in beside it, then a third, and a fourth, all tinted, all quiet. Her stomach tightened, not from fear, but from something older, a kind of alertness. The kind you only feel when something important is about to happen. She stepped back inside and watched through the window as the first SUV's passenger door opened. Out stepped a man in a dark suit, his coat pressed, his posture exact. He didn't rush, didn't look around nervously. He moved with the steady confidence of someone who didn't need to announce himself. Jenny recognized him before the door opened. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Older now, grayer at the temples, but unmistakable. He walked into the diner like it belonged to him, the bell above the door chiming once, then going still. The room quieted. Voices dropped. Even the sizzle from the kitchen seemed to pause. Jenny stood behind the counter, one hand resting on a coffee pot she'd forgotten to pour. Arnold looked around, eyes moving slowly until they landed on her. He walked up to the counter and placed an envelope in front of her, sealed with a red wax stamp, military style, the kind you didn't see in mailboxes. He said her name softly. "Miss Jenny Miller?" She nodded, her voice gone. "I was asked to deliver this to you," he said. "From a soldier who wanted to thank you." She took the envelope with both hands. It was heavier than it looked. He didn't explain. Didn't need to. He placed a hand gently over hers. Held it for just a second. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "what you do when no one's looking, that's the part that saves lives." Then he stepped back, and the room began to breathe again. She held the envelope long after Arnold had gone, the weight of it pressed into her palms like it had something more inside than paper. She didn't open it in front of the staff, didn't take it to the back room, just stood there behind the counter, still as the coffee pot beside her, while the world picked itself back up around her. A few customers whispered. Someone asked if it had been him. Was that really the governor? Jenny didn't answer. She placed the envelope on the shelf below the register and went back to pouring coffee. But her hands trembled a little now. Not from fear. From something deeper. The kind of shaking that happens when truth gets close enough to touch. She waited until after her shift. After the floor had been mopped. After the napkins were stacked. The sugar jars refilled. The lights dimmed. The others had gone home. She sat at the booth by the window, his booth, and opened the envelope with careful fingers. Inside was a folded letter on thick, cream-colored paper. The handwriting was strong, slanted. There was no greeting, no formal introduction, just a first sentence that stopped her breath. If you're reading this, it means I didn't make a home. She stared at those words for a long time before reading on. The letter was from Staff Sergeant Lucas Thompson. He was the boy's father, a soldier deployed overseas, a man who had known, even before his final mission, that the chances of return were low. And yet he had written this letter in peace, not fear. He had written it in case someone out there had shown kindness to his son. He explained that his son, Adam, had been staying with a family friend while he was away, that things hadn't gone as planned, that his boy had learned early to keep quiet and disappear when the world turned sharp. But that didn't mean he didn't feel everything. He won't ask for help, the letter read. But if he accepts something from you, it means he trusts you. That's not easy for him. Or for me. Jenny's throat tightened. There were parts of the letter that made her press her palm against her chest. I won't be there to teach him how to be a man. I won't be there to tell him it's okay to eat what's offered, to take a seat when someone save him one. So if you did that, if you fed him, even once, please know you didn't just feed a hungry kid. You fed the last part of me I'll ever get to send home. Jenny wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, then folded the letter carefully, exactly along the creases it came with, and placed it back into the envelope. She didn't cry in front of anyone. She hadn't in years. But sitting in that booth, beneath the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the buzz of the exit sign, she let herself feel what it meant to be seen. Not as a waitress, not as a background figure, but as someone who had mattered when it counted. The next morning, she came in early, not to start the coffee, but to pin something new to the corkboard near the kitchen. It was a copy of the letter. She didn't sign it, didn't point it out, just let it sit there, waiting to be read. By mid-morning, every staff member had seen it. No one asked questions. Some just nodded. Some looked at Jenny with something different in their eyes. Later that week, a woman came into the diner with her son. She looked like she hadn't slept much. The boy, maybe 6, clung to her hand and wouldn't meet anyone's gaze. Jenny didn't hover, but she placed a slice of pie in front of him, no charge, and said nothing when he looked up with cautious surprise. "Thank you," the woman whispered. Jenny just nodded. After they left, Melissa, the youngest waitress, leaned over and asked, "You gonna keep doing that now? Feeding people who don't ask?" Jenny paused before answering. "Sometimes the ones who don't ask," she said softly, "are the ones who need it most." The pie wasn't charged. No one adjusted the drawer. No one complained. The booth by the window remained empty for a few more days. But Jenny kept wiping it down anyway, kept folding napkins there, kept leaving a small vase with flour from her backyard, not because she expected anyone, but because she wanted the boy to know, when he came back, that his seat had never been taken. And eventually, someone did return, but it wasn't who she expected. It was a Tuesday when he came back, not with the quiet shuffle she remembered, not with his shoulders drawn in tight like he used to. He walked in standing straighter than before, but still careful, like someone testing the floor after a long storm. Jenny was at the counter when she saw him. Her heart didn't leap, but it did pause, just for a second. He didn't look any older, not really, but there was something different in his face. Something quieter, more certain, like he'd been holding a secret and had finally decided to let someone carry it with him. He didn't say a word, just nodded once in her direction and took the booth by the window. His booth. She didn't rush over, didn't flood the moment. She poured a glass of water, brought a plate with toast and eggs and half a peach, sliced into little crescent moons like she used to do. She set it down with a folded napkin, then turned and walked away. He ate slowly, didn't open his book this time, just sat there, watching the rain start to slip down the window beside him. When he finished, he pushed the plate forward gently, like he didn't want to make a sound. Jenny passed by and caught his eye. That's when he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small object, wrapped in fabric. He stood up and walked over to her. The diner wasn't busy, but people still watched. He didn't seem to notice. He placed the object on the counter between them and unwrapped it. It was a challenge coin, military, bronze, slightly wore at the edges. He didn't say what it meant. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes told her everything. She picked it up, turned it over in her hand. On one side, a Marine emblem. On the other, 3 words, not forgotten, ever. She looked up at him and saw the same eyes she first noticed months ago. Sharp, searching, old beyond their years. But now they weren't just asking if it was safe to sit. They were saying thank you. He didn't stay long. Just nodded again, turned, and left the way he'd come in. No fanfare. No goodbye. Just the sound of the diner's bell and the hush that followed. The coin stayed on the shelf behind the counter after that. Some customers asked what it was. Jenny always gave the same answer. It's a promise. No one questioned her twice. A week later, the local newspaper ran a story. Not about her. Not even about the boy. It was about the diner. About the booth by the window. About how someone had fed a child without ever needing a reason. The article didn't name names. But people knew. They always know. Veterans started showing up more often. Some sat quietly and watched. Others brought their families. A few left notes on napkins. One woman left a single white rose in a to-go cup. Dave, the manager, printed a small plaque and screwed it into the wall above the booth. It read, "Reserved for quiet bravery." No one ever sat there without permission again. The staff changed, slowly. Melissa asked to learn about ranks. She started recognizing insignias on jackets, knowing when to nod and when to say sir. A teenager who used to clean tables part-time started leaving a plate of pie near the back each Thursday afternoon. No explanation. Jenny didn't talk about the boy anymore. She didn't have to. What he'd brought, what his father had sent through him, wasn't something that needed retelling. It had become part of the place. One night, as Jenny was locking up, she found a piece of folded paper tucked behind the napkin holder. She opened it. The handwriting was familiar. "Thanks for saving me a seat." No signature. Just that. She didn't cry. She folded the note and placed it in the envelope that held his father's letter. Then she turned off the lights and left the booth by the window just as it was, clean, still, and waiting. The diner didn't change overnight. The booth still creaked when you leaned in too far. The coffee still tasted slightly burnt after noon. The bell above the door still rang a half-second too late. But something in the air shifted, quiet and steady. It started with the plaque above the window seat, then spread across the walls like sunlight. Someone began tacking up photos. Veterans from the area, young and old, smiling in uniforms that told their own stories. No spotlight, no captions, just a wall of faces that had given more than they'd ever taken. Jenny didn't put her picture up. She wasn't in any of them, but her presence filled the space in other ways. She still folded napkins into neat stacks each morning, still brewed the first pot of coffee herself, even when it wasn't her shift. Her hands were the same, steady, worn, capable, but people started noticing the way they moved, how she placed a plate, how she refilled a cup. Like each motion carried a quiet kind of care. Veterans who used to sit near the door began gravitating to the middle of the room. Some nodded at the wall. Others sat in silence, sipping their coffee slowly, their eyes drawn to the plaque as if it said more than it did. One man left a coin beneath his plate every time he came in. Different branches, different tours, a little piece of his past traded for a moment of peace. A high school teacher brought her civics class on a field trip one Thursday morning. The kids were quiet at first, unsure why they'd come. But by the time they left, half of them had asked Jenny how long she'd worked there. She didn't give them the full story. Just smiled and handed them a napkin folded into a triangle. Not a flag, just a gesture. One girl stayed behind. She looked maybe 16, the kind of age where the world feels too loud to hold. She asked Jenny, "Is it true that you helped someone and didn't even know who he was?" Jenny thought for a second, then nodded. "Sometimes the best things you'll ever do won't come with a name," she said. The girl wrote that down. It made the back of a yearbook that spring. Dave, the manager, had a new sign installed above the front entrance. Not flashy, Just a single line painted in block letters. Everyone deserves a seat. People took photos of it, posted them online. It wasn't viral in the way stories usually are, but it reached the right people. The kind of people who needed to know that dignity still existed in places with cracked tiles and half-empty ketchup bottles. Every so often, someone new would walk in carrying something small, an envelope, a coin, a folded note, and place it on a window table. Jenny never asked who sent them. She just opened them slowly and read each word as if it mattered, because it did. One night, just before closing, a young woman in a pressed army uniform stepped inside. She stood near the door for a moment, unsure, then approached the counter. Her posture was straight. Her eyes were tired. She carried a photo in her hand. She placed it on the counter. It was a picture of a man in fatigues, smiling beside a small boy in a hoodie. The boy looked younger then, less guarded. "That was my brother," she said. "The boy you fed." Jenny didn't say anything right away. Just let the silence settle the way it always did when something true was being shared. "He didn't talk about much after our dad died, but he talked about you. Said you made space for him when the world didn't." Jenny looked down at the photo, then back up at her. "You helped him remember what safe felt like," the woman added. Jenny reached for a napkin and folded it slowly. "I'm glad he came in," she said. The woman smiled. "It wasn't why, but it was real. He always said you reminded him of our dad. Not in the way you looked, in the way you didn't give up on people." They sat together for a while, not needing to fill the quiet. When the woman left, she gave Jenny a patch from her sleeve. Jenny didn't frame it, just pinned it to the corkboard near the kitchen with a single thumbtack. Months passed. The diner stayed open, steady as ever. Some nights were busier than others. Some mornings started slow, but the booth by the window was never forgotten. One day, a little boy wandered in holding his mother's hand. He couldn't have been more than 5. His eyes scanned the room and landed on the plaque. He asked what it meant. Jenny knelt beside him, pointed to the words. "It means there's always a place for someone who needs one," she said. He nodded like he understood more than she expected. Then he smiled. She smiled back. And in that moment, everything the boy's father had hoped for, everything Jenny had quietly built, was still here, waiting, alive, and full of light.